Well, hello and welcome. This is Lanita, the Scrappy Grandma, and this is our weekly Bible reading playlist, the Torah portions. And this week we are on Torah portion number 9. So we're nine weeks in. And this week is called Vayeshev, meaning and he settled. And so the ninth Torah portion, Vayeshev, and he settled, marks the beginning of the story of Joseph. Oh, it's getting dicey. Jacob's favorite son. The narrative opens when Jacob settling in Canaan and Joseph's brothers resenting him due to Jacob's favoritism, and Joseph's prophetic dream, which foretell his eventual rise to prominence. Consumed by jealousy, they conspired against him, selling him into slavery and deceiving Jacob by claiming Joseph was killed. Joseph is taken to Egypt, where he rises to prominence in Potiphar's household, but is falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and imprisoned. While in prison, Joseph interprets the dream of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, providing a glimpse of his God-given ability to foresee the future. Vayeshev introduces themes of suffering, resilience, and the unfolding of God's providential plan despite human betrayal and hardship. And I'm reading out of the Torah Portions workbook by Agape Love Co. For those of us that like to color, we've got a coloring page. Then we've got the portions, talks about the portions. If you want to do extra readings here, it has here meanings of words, which is fascinating when you start looking up the different meanings of the Hebrew words. And then lots of notes. Oh, I think I skipped a page, yeah, because there should be. Come on. Huh. Upside down and backwards. So bunch of notes and then a reflection page. I know that Angelina does bubbles, like tying all the things together. But it's really built well for all different types of study. So we are going to start in prayer. Ooh, Father Yah, thank you for allowing us to settle in and dig into your ways, your instructions. Bless everyone that hears this. Open eyes and ears and help us to know you better, how to walk in covenant with you better, how to walk the way of our Messiah better through the study of your living word, your Torah. Thank you so much that we have the access and the opportunity to feast on your word. Bless this time together. Bless everyone this is sent out to. And all for your glory, my King. All for your glory. All right. Amen. So it's been a week, and I'll be sharing about all that on my update, my Living in the Way. I think that's what it's called, Living in the Way update, my next video. But some of the themes of this portion are what I'm walking through right now. I'll just say, I love that at the end. That one. There we go. That one. Yeah. God's providential plan, despite, no, here we go. Oh, darn it, where did it go? It's about resilience and, yeah, there we go. Themes of suffering, resilience, and the unfolding of God's providential plan, despite human betrayal and hardship. And it's all in where we put our focus. And boy, am I been learning this, because I'm in a situation right now that can completely pull me out of keeping my eyes on him, because there's so many things happening at once and there's a lot of responsibility. And I'm so thankful for my sisters who keep helping to keep me in my lane and redirect me and keep me on the right path and thinking the right way, taking my thoughts captive and bringing them into submission to the Messiah and his ways. So Let's begin some of my favorite. The Joseph story is my favorite story anyway, so getting into some of my favorites. Go up to Genesis. Oh, I have to share my screen. Hold on. I think it's Genesis 37. Yeah, let me check, make sure. Yep, 37. Okay, let me share my screen. Share that one. That way. And make me little. Share. All right, there we go. Genesis 37:1, Joseph's dreams. Yaakov continued living in the land where his father had lived as a foreigner, the land of Canaan. Here's the history of Yaakov, which is Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock with his brothers, even though he was still a boy. Once, when he was with the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, his father's wives, he brought a bad report about them to their father. So basically, he went and tattled on his brothers. And now Israel loved Joseph the most of all of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long-sleeved robe. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where they couldn't even talk with him in a civil manner. Joseph had a dream, which he told his brothers, that made them hate him all the more. He said to them, "Listen, while I tell you about this dream of mine. We are tying up bundles of wheat in the field when suddenly my bundle got up by itself and stood upright. Then your bundles came and gathered around mine and prostrated themselves before it." I think it's fascinating, this word prostrate. I looked it up. It's just really, for me, I love to get a visual of what's going on. And it's like, what exactly is prostrate? And it literally is laying in the dirt, face down. So imagine in those days, they don't have all the modern conveniences. They can't go just change their clothes or throw them in the wash machine or, wash their hair or, all the stuff that we can just so easily do. So we go put ourselves back in that situation and, prostrating. So, I mean, I know this is a dream and it's about wheat, but think about, so all of their bundles laid themselves out and Joseph is standing up. His brothers retorted, "Yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around." And they hated him still the more for his dreams and for what he said. Oh, excuse me. He had another dream, which he told his brothers, "Here, I had another dream. And there were the sun and the moon and 11 stars prostrating themselves before me." He told his father too, as well as his brothers, but his father rebuked him. "What is this dream you have? Do you really expect me, your mother, and your brothers to come and prostrate ourselves before you on the ground?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Put it in his pocket, as some of us in our Bible study like to say. We hear something and it's like, I know that's significant. I know it's important. I'm just going to put it in my pocket and let the father bubble it up and see what's going to happen. So Joseph sold by his brothers. After this, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's sheep in Shechem, now if we remember, Shechem from last week is where Dinah, their sister, the daughter of Leah, where Shechem, I think that was his name, took her and wanted her, and where they destroyed, of their own lust and vengeance, destroyed. I learned this. I had a comment from last week's, and because I was like, I kind of get it. My sister gets raped and all this, and they handled it. But it wasn't led of Yah. It was led of their own passion, lusts, and vengeance. And vengeance is mine, says Yahweh. So, so this is Shechem, where all of that took place. And Israel asked Joseph, "Aren't your brothers pasturing the sheep in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, Here I am. He said to him, Go now, see whether things are going well with your brothers and with the sheep, and bring word back to me. So he sent him away from the Hebron valley, and he went to Shechem, where a man found him wandering around the countryside. And the man asked him, What are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my brothers, he answered. Tell me, please, where they're pasturing their sheep. The man said, They've left here because I heard them say, Let's go to Dothan. Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And if I remember correctly, I think it's in the book of Jasher, where like basically his brothers were just like going to party. They were like, woohoo, and in Dothan they went to party. They spotted him in a distance, and before he had arrived where they were, they had already plotted to kill him. They said to each other, Look, the dreamer is coming. So come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these water cisterns here. Then we'll say that some wild animal devoured him, and we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But Reuben heard this, and he saved him from being destroyed by them. And he said, You shouldn't take his life. Now, it's interesting. Reuben slept with Bilhah last week's portion and cut off Rachel and Bilhah's lineage. Well, no more children could be born from that side. So he's like redeeming himself here. Don't shed blood, Reuben added. Throw him into a cistern. Well, kind of redeems himself here in the wilds, but don't lay hands on him yourselves. He intended to rescue him later and restore him to his father. So yeah, he's redeeming himself here. So it was that when Joseph arrived to be with his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the long sleeve robe he was wearing, and took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty without any water in it. Then they sat down to eat their meal, but as they looked up, they saw in front of them a caravan of Ishmaelim, descendants from the tribe of Ishmael. Remember, it was Hagar, the slave, Abraham's slave, or Sarah's slave girl, Jacob's brother. I'm sorry, not Jacob's brother, Isaac's brother, half brother, coming from Gilead. Their camels loaded with aromatic gum, healing resin, and opium on their way down to Egypt. Yehuda, Judah, said to his brothers, What advantage is it us if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelim instead of putting him to death with our own hands. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh. His brothers paid attention to him. When the Midianite merchants passed by, they drew and lifted Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for half a pound of silver shekels to the Ishmaelim, who took Joseph on to Egypt. Now, it's interesting here because we always thought his brothers pulled him out. And I think there was some of this in Jasher also, the book of Jasher, which is an extra biblical book, which I don't think holds the same weight as Scripture, but it was removed from Scripture, so who knows? But I know that it was Hebrew literature and that it was, common to read. But it looks like the Midianites actually found him and took him out of the well, and they sold him to the Ishmaelim. Ishmaelim, yeah. So, but anyway, Reuben then returned to the cistern, and upon seeing that Joseph wasn't in it, tore his clothes in mourning. He returned to his brothers and said, The boy isn't there. Where can I go now? They took Joseph's robe, killed a male goat, and dipped the robe in blood. Then they sent along the long sleeve robe and brought it in to their father, saying, We have found this. Do you know if it's your son's robe or not? He recognized it and cried, His son's robe. Some wild animal has torn Joseph in pieces and eaten him. Yaakov tore his clothes, putting on sackcloth around his waist, mourned his son for many days. Though all of his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused all console, saying, No, I will go down to the grave to my son mourning. And his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midian sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, a captain of the guard. This is another real interesting story here, Yehuda, Judah and Tamar. Um, it was this time that Yehuda went off from his brothers and settled near a man named Haram, who was an Adulami. There, Yehuda saw one of the daughters of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and he slept with her. Okay, so he married a Canaanite. Judah married a Canaanite woman, and they weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to keep it within the tribes of Israel. She conceived and had a son, whom he named She conceived again and had a son, and she called him Onan. Then she conceived yet again and had a son, whom she called Shelah. He was in Kiziv when she gave birth to him. Yehuda took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Yehuda's firstborn, was evil from Adonai's perspective. Ooh, that's interesting how they add that in there. So he was evil from Adonai's perspective, so Adonai killed him. Man, wouldn't you like to know more about that story? Yehuda said to Onan, "Go sleep with your brother's wife, perform the duty of a husband's brother to her, and preserve your brother's line of descent." However, Onan knew that the child would not count as his, so whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground so as to not give his brother offspring. What he did was evil from Adonai's perspective, so he killed him too. Then Yehuda said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Stay a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, "I don't want him to die too like his brothers." So Tamar went and lived at home with her father. In due time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Yehuda, died. After Yehuda had been comforted, he went up to be with his sheep shearers in Timnah, he and his friend Haran, the Adullamite. Anyway, Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law has gone up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's clothes, completely covered her face with a veil, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Selah had grown up, but still was not given to him as his wife. When Yehuda saw her, he thought she was a prostitute because she had covered her face. So he went over to her where she was sitting and said, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, "Come, let me sleep with you." And she answered, "What will you pay me to sleep with me?" "I will send you a kid from the flock of goats." She said, "Will you also give me something as a guarantee until you send it?" He answered, "What should I give you as a guarantee?" And she said, "Your seal with its cord and the staff you're carrying in your hand." So he gave them to her and went in, and he slept with her. Oops, sorry. And she conceived by him. She got up and went away, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothes. Okay, so once again, I'm always, trying to work this all out in my brain. She goes back to her dad's house, and then all of a sudden, after a point, she's going to start looking pregnant. And that's going to be a disgrace. So Yehuda sent the kid with his friend, the Adulami, to receive the guarantees items back from the woman, but he couldn't find her. He asked the people near where she had been, "Where's the prostitute who was on the road to Enaim?" Enaim. But they answered, "There hasn't been any prostitute here." So he returned to Yehuda. Excuse me. And said, "I couldn't find her." Also, the people there said, "There hasn't been any prostitute here." Yehuda said, "All right, let her keep the things so that we won't be publicly shamed. I sent the kid, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Yehuda was told, okay, here it goes, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been acting like a whore. Moreover, she is pregnant as the result of her prostitution." Yehuda said, "Bring her out and let her be burned alive." Okay, so the story here with this being burned alive is, if I'm not mistaken, Tamar's father was a priest. Let's look it up real quick. Pretty sure Tamar's father was a priest, and the priest's daughters had a higher responsibility, and if they were caught, being a whore or prostitute, they had to be burned alive or burned alive. So I'm trying to figure out where to go here. There we go. Um, Tamar. Sorry. Okay, why Tamar was threatened with burning. In Genesis 38:24, Judah was told that Tamar is pregnant while still formally bound to his family since she was promised to Sarah, Judah's youngest son. Judah, acting as patriarch, declares, "Bring her out and let her be burned." This is not because she was a priest daughter, rather, it's reflected ancient patriarchal justice. Judah believed she had committed adultery while she was pledged to his household. Later in the Torah, Leviticus 21:9, it says that if a priest's daughter becomes guilty of prostitution, she is to be burned. But she lived before the priesthood was established, before Moses and Aaron. Yeah, well, some of those things probably still existed before they became official. So anyway, um, when she was brought out, she sent this message to her father-in-law: "I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong. Determine, I beg you, whose these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff." Then Yehuda acknowledged owning them. He said, "She is more righteous than I because I did not let her become the wife of my son Salah." And he never slept with her again. When she went into labor, it became evident that she was going to have twins. Look how the father blessed her. As she was in labor, one of them putting his hand out his hand, the midwife took his hand and tied a scarlet thread on it, saying, "This one came out first." But then he withdrew his hand and his brother came out. So she said, "How did you manage to break out first?" Therefore, his name was Peretz, meaning breakout. Then out came his brother with the scarlet on his hand, and he was given the name Zerach, scarlet. Joseph and Potiphar's wife. um, you know, I'm flashing back because last year I read Jasher along with Genesis. And so I'm like having flashbacks. So, like, with Potiphar's wife, when she was in the palace alone with him, most everybody had gone to some sort of festival, and she chose to stay back. Um, like I said, if you feel led to, the extra biblical books are interesting. Um, so, and they just kind of make everything kind of come to life. So, Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him from the Ishmaelim who had brought him there. Adonai was with Joseph, and he became wealthy while he was in the household of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw how Adonai was with him. Then Adonai prospered everything he did. Joseph pleased him as he served him, and his master appointed him manager over his household. He entrusted all of his possessions to Joseph. From the time he appointed him manager and his household and all of his possessions, Adonai blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. Adonai blessing all, Joseph's sake. Adonai's blessing was on all that he owned, whether in the house or in the field. So he left all of his possessions in Joseph's care because he had him. He paid no attention to his affairs except for the food that he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome and well. In time, the day came when his master's wife took a look at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." And he refused, saying to his master's wife, "Look, because my master has me, he doesn't know what is going on in this house. He has put all of his possessions in my charge. In this house, I am equal. He hasn't withheld anything from me except for yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" But she kept pressuring him day after day. Nevertheless, he didn't listen to her. He refused to sleep with her or even be with her. However, one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of them men living in the house was there indoors, and they said this, they were all at a feast or something, she grabbed him by his robe and said, "Sleep with me." But he fled, leaving his robe in her hand, and got himself outside. When she saw that he had left the robe in her hand and had escaped, she called the men of her house and said to them, "Look at this. My husband brought in a Hebrew to make fools of us. He came in and wanted to sleep with me, yet I yelled out loudly. When he heard me yelling like that, he left his robe with me and ran out." She put the robe aside until her master came home. Then she said to him, "This Hebrew slave you brought us came in to make a fool of me. But when I yelled, he left his robe with me and fled outside." When his master heard what his wife had said, as she showed him, "Here's what your slave did to me," he became furious. And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison in the place where the king's prisoners were kept. And there he was in the prison. And if I'm not mistaken, in the story of Jasher, it talked about how he actually had the code examined, and he knew that Joseph wasn't guilty, but he had to save face, something like that. Um, but Adonai was with Joseph, showing him grace and giving him favor in the sight of the prison warden. Okay, so he's young. His brothers hate him. His father loves him. They sabotage him. He gets kidnapped and taken to a foreign country, so his life is completely upended, and everything is completely changed in his world. And then he finally gets a decent position, even being a slave. He's still being prospered, and he's being appreciated and respected, and able to multiply, at least his owner's things. And then yet another blow hits and he ends up in prison. But Yah still gives him favor. The prison warden made Joseph supervisor of all the prisoners in the prison, so that whatever they did, he was in charge of it. The prison warden paid no attention to anything Joseph did because Adonai was with him, and whatever he did, Adonai prospered. Second here. Okay. Joseph interprets two prisoners' dreams. So, sometime later, it came about that the Egyptian king's cupbearer and baker gave offense to their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh became angry with his two officers and chief cupbearers and chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison in the same place where Joseph was kept. The captain of the guard charged Joseph to be with them, and he became their attendant while they remained in prison. One night, the two of them, the king of Egypt's cupbearer and his baker, there in prison, both had dreams, and each dream with its own meaning. Joseph came into them in the morning and saw that they looked sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers there with him in the prison, his master's house, "Why are you looking so sad today?" And they said, "We each had a dream, and there's no one around who can interpret it." Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please." Then the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "In my dream, there in front of me was a vine. And the vine had 3 branches, and the branches budded. Then it suddenly became a blossom, and finally clusters of ripe grapes appeared. Joseph's cup was in my hand, or Pharaoh's cup, was in my hand. So I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and gave the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph said to him, 'Here's the interpretation of the 3 branches, are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. You will be giving Pharaoh his cup as you used to when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it goes well with you, and show me kindness, please, and mention me to Pharaoh so that he will release me from this prison.'" For the truth is that I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I have done nothing wrong that would justify putting me into this dungeon." When the chief baker saw the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "I too saw my dream. There were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the upmost basket there were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds ate them out of the basket on my head." So Joseph answered, "Here's the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off of you. He will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a party for all of his officials, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer back to his position, so that he again gave Pharaoh his cup. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Nevertheless, the chief cupbearer didn't remember Joseph, but forgot him. I think that's the end of this one. 40:23, yes. So then the prophets is Amos 2:6. So this is about judgment on Israel. Here's what Adonai says: "For Israel's 3 crimes, no 4, I will not reverse, because they sell the upright for silver and the poor for a pair of shoes, grinding the heads of the poor in the dust and pushing the lowly out of the way. Father and son sleep with the same girl, profaning my holy name, laying down beside any altar on clothes taken in pledge, drinking wine in the house of their God, brought with fines they imposed. I destroyed the emery before them. Through tall as cedars and strong as oaks, I destroyed their fruit above and their roots below. More than that, I brought you up from Egypt, led you 40 years in the desert so that you could have the Emery's land. I raised up some of your sons to be prophets, other young men of yours to be Nazarene." That's probably maybe Nazarene. Like I know the Nazarene vow. So maybe have a interesting. People of Israel, isn't that true? Asks Adonai. I wonder. Wow. I gotta look it up. So it's in Zirim. What does that mean? Oh. Okay, what does it mean? It's continuing to point to us. Consecrated ones. So I raised up some of your sons to be prophets, other young men to be your consecrated ones, so probably your priests. People of Israel, isn't that true? Asks Adonai. But you gave the Nazarene wine to drink and ordered the prophets do not prophesy. Because, like when you take a Nazarene vow, which I'm thinking that this is, you don't cut your hair, you don't drink alcohol, you don't touch anything, don't eat of anything of the vine. So no grapes, things like that. So enough. I will make all of this crush for you, just as the cart overloaded with grain crushes what's under it. Even the swift won't be able to flee. The strong won't be able to use their strength. The warriors won't save themselves. Archers won't be able to stand. The fastest runners won't save themselves. Those on horses won't save themselves. On that day, even the bravest warriors will throw off their weapons and flee. And then lastly is Matthew 1:18 to 25. So the birth of Yeshua. Here is how the birth of Yeshua the Messiah took place. When his mother Miriam was engaged to Joseph, before they were married, she was found to be pregnant from the Ruach HaKodesh, from the Holy Spirit. Her husband to be, Joseph, was a man who did what was right. So he made plans to break the engagement quietly rather than put her to public shame. But while he was thinking about this, an angel of Adonai appeared to him in a dream and said, Yosef, son of David, do not be afraid to take Miriam home with you as your wife, for what has been conceived in her is from the Ruach HaKodesh. She will give birth to a son, and you will name him Yeshua, which means Adonai saves, because he will save his people from their sins. All this happened in order to fulfill what Adonai had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and bear a son, and they will call him Emmanuel El. The name means God is with us. When Yosef woke, he did what the angel of Adonai had told him to do, and he took Miriam home to be his wife. But he did not have sexual relationships with her until she had given birth to a son and named him Yeshua. So that is it for this week. I hope you have a blessed week. And let me know your thoughts. If there's any questions you have or anything like that, put it in the comments. I have been bad about, I didn't know where to check the comments, but I found them today. Hey, so I can check comments. So, hey, pop in and say hi. Anyway, all right, be blessed, and y'all willing, we will see you next week.